CALPADS error resolution, Plan 0619F1, invalid special education program setting code. Again, as always, the first step to troubleshooting any error in CALPADS is to consult the CALPADS error list. From left to right, let's walk through the error list. The first column, you have the error number, Plan 0619F1, and the error name, invalid special education program setting code. So the key thing here is the F1 in the error number tells you that this is a fall 1 error. And because it's a fall 1 error, we're looking at data that's reflective of census day. So that's important. The second thing is the error name, invalid special education program setting code. This seems like a description, but it's not, because if you look at the third column, error description, you can see how much more detail, how much more lengthy the description is. I always caution those of you working in CALPADS, do not try to troubleshoot simply using the error number and the error name that's given to you in the system. Always refer to your documentation, beginning with the error list. So here we have the error description. Students with disabilities who are 5 years old and in transitional kindergarten or higher must have a special education program setting code populated and not equal to 201, 203, 204. That's regular early childhood, separate class, or service provider location as a program setting code. Okay, and now the column most central, the fields validated. It's telling us that we have to look at SENR data, right? That's our student enrollment record. The students with disability status data and the plan data, right? So there's 3 containers we have to look at. So the best way to review or to troubleshoot this error is to examine the student detail screen where we can access all 3 containers and make our comparisons in the fields validated. And then lastly, sometimes overlooked, is the suggested resolution. Usually at the top of this column is information that helps us understand the error, and then later on, resolution methods, right? So let's just talk about this, or let's read it. Populate the special education program setting with a code other than 201, 203, or 204. It's pretty straightforward. We should perhaps expound upon this, giving you the reason why. But essentially, if you do this, you may correct the error. Fall 1 also confirms that the student is enrolled at the same reporting LEA on census day. So you have the SENR data. And then at the academic year for your students with disability. So you want to also make sure that in your students with disability status record that student should in fact be eligible and participating. So those are a couple suggested resolution things to look for. And so this is a perfect example why you need additional documentation for understanding. The error list in of itself may not tell you exactly how to resolve your scenario. And so understanding what's required in the field or in the student record may help you. So you can always reference the code set. Since we're triggering errors on the code set, you can see we have special education program setting code 201, 203, 204. Those that should not be populated in this scenario. And you can see here, there's a little bit indication in the definition of how those codes are used. The majority of special education services are provided to an early childhood program, right? So that's key here, that this program code is intended for those students where the majority of their special education services are in an early childhood program. And it tells you you can be used for TK students. That's part of the trigger for the error when the student is less than 5. So if you go back to the error list, students with disabilities who are 5 years old and in transitional kindergarten, TK, or higher must have a special education code populated and not be 201, 203, 204. And so we saw with code 201, it was appropriate for students in TK who are not 5. So you can see that clearly in the definition. Then moving on to 203, separate class. In this setting, the student attends special education program in a class with less than 50% non-disabled children. That doesn't really provide us much information. And then the third one, 204, service provider location. This is the setting when children receive all special education and related services from a service provider and the child did not attend an early childhood program. So this kind of suggests that this is comparable to an early childhood program. It's just for students who were not in the early childhood program. And so it lists the different examples where it would be appropriate for 204. And this is an example of how you have to infer. You have to have an understanding of the different documentation, the codes, special education in general, different plan types. So you're going to have to be able to infer some information at times. It's just part of troubleshooting and problem solving. So that may not have been enough, right? And this is where organizational knowledge, institutional knowledge comes in handy. So anyone who predates the special education redesign that was submitting data for students with disabilities might remember we had a similar error and the logic is largely the same, although the record types are different. So, I had the benefit of working in CALPADS previous to the SPED redesign, and I remembered the flash that addressed this scenario. And so here it is in front of you, CALPADS Flash Update 244. This is just an excerpt. The CALPADS Flash messages are archived at the CALPADS communication page. And here you can see I've highlighted some things. These data are important for reporting and monitoring whether students are being educated in the least restrictive environment. When the field is not populated with the appropriate program setting code based on the student's age and grade level, various CDDs will trigger. So I highlighted that because, if you understand the purpose of and what is the least restrictive environment, you kind of understand why those program setting codes may be inappropriate for a school age student. And then here's a description that perhaps we may add to the error list. It has to be modified a bit because the record types have changed, but this is, useful information. But again, going to what's highlighted, note the amendment date must be on or prior to census day. Again, all errors that have the F1 suffix on the error name are reflective of census day in order to clear the error. If the student's first day of kindergarten or academic year was before their most recent IEP meeting that overlaps census day, then submit an amendment on the most recent record with an amendment date that is after the meeting date or prior to census day. So essentially it's telling you need to submit an amendment if you have a record overlapping census day triggering the error. And so we'll talk about that in our scenarios in the live demo. And so, you can always continue in digging, and sometimes you can reference resources outside of CALPADS. So here's a couple websites that help us, right? You have the SEPA Administrators of California and Understood. And so they essentially say the same thing because they're citing the Individuals with Disability Education Act, but it says, as far as least restrictive environment or LRE, to the maximum extent appropriate, children with disabilities, including children in public or private institutions or other care facilities, are educated with students who are non-disabled. The second part is special classes, separate schooling, and other removals for children with disabilities from regular education environment occur only if the nature or severity of disability in that is such that education and regular classes for the use of supplementary aids and services cannot be achieved satisfactorily. All right. So I think what's important is it identifies special classes, separate schooling, and other removals should only be used to the extent that the traditional educational environment does not meet the student's needs. So if we go back to the code sets, you can see we have separate class, service provider location, and a regular earlyhood child program, right? Not a traditional classroom environment with the other students, right? So, okay, and so the third scenario, Student turns 5 years old since last special education meeting or amendment and has entered TK and above. But the record overlapping census day has an inappropriate special education program setting code. So this is a variation of uh, the second one. The special education setting code is populated, but it's populated prior to the student turning 5 or entering TK. And so now it then triggered the error because it wasn't appropriate for the student who is 5 and in TK. So those are three different types of scenarios in which the plan 0619F1 will trigger. Now, let's walk through a couple of these errors using an online demonstration. Okay, so we're going to look at some plan 0619F1 errors. Again, this is the certification detail screen. You click show, it will reveal the SSIDs that are triggering these two errors. If you scroll down, right, message ID, you have your two SSIDs. And if I wanted to get to the error list, I can right click PLAN0619F1. And always, I like to open in a new tab. I've done that for 3 errors. So I've used these two, and this one is from a different district. So we'll look at the student details. First thing, we know the conditions are the student has to be 5, so we verify the student's birth date, 6/22/2018. So 6/22/2023, the student turned 5. So that was over the summer or the last school year. And then we look at the student enrollment container, and I can see the students in kindergarten. Okay, as of 8/15/2023. So we scroll down. We look at the students with disability status. The student is eligible and participating. So that tells us the student should have an active special education plan. So we go to the plan container, and we can see that there's 2 records here, right? One is 10/17/2023. If we go over to the program setting code, it's 400. So this record should not trigger the error. And I can confirm that it did not. And we know that because the special education plan effective start date is 10/17/2023. It is after census day, which is 10/5/2023. And so this record is after census day. Therefore, this updated plan or this updated special education program setting code is not triggering the error. So we look at the next oldest record, which was effective from 5/5/2023 until this plan was submitted. So this record is the one that's effective over census day. And if we scroll to the right, we can see that the student was in a separate classroom, code 203. Going back to the error list, 201, 203, and 204 are not appropriate. So we pull the error list here. We can see 201, 203, and 204 will trigger the error. The student is 5 and in kindergarten. So we'll scroll back up. The student turned 5 after that last plan effective start date. So at the time that plan was, legitimate, it was a good record. The student turned 5 and then entered kindergarten on 8/15. So the second condition was met, or both conditions were met on 8/15/2023. So the amendment should be submitted on a plan record with an amendment date of 8/15/2023 will resolve this error. So you need another amendment, and this record was converted during the SPED redesign. So all we have here is the amendment, but another amendment to the plan should be submitted on the enrollment start date, the date that the second condition was met, 8/15/2023, and that will resolve this error. And regular classroom 400 for the plan setting code would be just fine. So moving on to the next one. Again, we first want to confirm how old our student is. So The birth date is 6/3/2018, so 6/3/2023. Again, last academic year or over the summer, the student turned 5, and we could see that the student was in kindergarten or entered kindergarten on 8/15/2023. Coming down, we confirm through the student with disability status record, the student is eligible and participating. And we have, again, 2 records, similar scenario. The special education plan effective start date is after census day. So this is what's triggering the error, because uh, the regular classroom public day school program setting code is correct. It's just after census day. So CalPAD's looking for the record effective on census day. That would be this plan, because the start date is prior to census day, 5/3/2023, and we can see separate class. So again, the student turned 5 on 6/3/2023 after that plan effective start date. So again, at the time the record was submitted, it was a valid record. The data was correct. It became incorrect when the student turned 5 and then entered kindergarten. So the student entered kindergarten here. It was previously preschool. So 8/15/2023, I would expect to see a plan record with a plan effective start date of 8/15/2023, and it should be an amended record. I should see it amended in that plan record. That would resolve the error. So moving on to the third example. Okay, so here we have pancake syrup at Maple Elementary. And now we're going to look at the student's record. We can see that the student is in kindergarten 8/10/2023. This is the record overlapping census day. So this is the enrollment that we're going to consider. And we want to look at the status for the student. So we scroll down to students with disability status. We confirm that the student is eligible and participating. So now we're going to look at the plan record. So the last plan effective start date was 5/22/2023. We can see that this was an amendment and separate class was submitted. So this one's a little bit different from the previous examples, because at the time of the plan effective start date, the student was 5 already. So while submitting an amendment to overlap census day would correct this, would correct the plan 0619F1 error, this record that's in the student's plan history here looks incorrect. The student turned 5 in 2022. Their birth date was 12/5/2017. The plan effective start date was after the student was already 5, right? So I almost feel like deleting this record would be the appropriate solution and submitting a correct one. The student should have never been in a separate classroom at the time. Now, we just did the special education redesign. Perhaps the validation wasn't written exactly the same as it is now. So it could be very well, or it could be appropriate to submit an amendment after 5/22/2023, one that mirrors this enrollment start date. Since the student was already 5, the second part of the condition was met when the student enrolled in kinder, and that should resolve the plan 0619F1 error. So that's something to look at your conversion records, to make sure that the data is submitted correctly. So that's how you resolve the plan 0619F1 error. You're going to look for a student who is 5 years old and older by confirming the birth date, in TK or above by looking at the grade level and the enrollment start date, verifying that the student is eligible and participating through the students with disability status. And then you're going to identify the plan record with the inappropriate special education program setting code. Make sure that it's overlapping census day by the special education plan effective start date. and then considering if adding an amendment would resolve the error, if perhaps you held a meeting and those records just haven't been submitted, and if so, if the meeting was held prior to census day. All right, so good luck in troubleshooting your Plan 0619F1 errors. Hopefully this demonstration was a benefit to you.